Let's look at some of the built-in method for strings. So let's say we have name is equal to John. John in small letters. If I want to convert these letters to upper cases, I can use the upper method. So here I can have result is equal to name dot upper. Now let me print out the result. So here we have print result. I'm also going to be printing out the name before changing it to upper cases. So here we can have print name. Now if I run the program, you can see we have successfully converted the characters or the letters to upper cases. Now let's say we have the letters in upper cases like this. If I want to convert the characters to lower cases, I'm going to be using dot lower. So now if I run the program, you can see the letters are now in lower cases. So previously they were in upper cases. Then after this operation, they are now in lower cases. Then we also have the title case. In this case, let me have John in small letters. And here I'm going to change this to title. Then if I run this program, it's going to change the first character to upper case. Let's say you want to determine whether all the characters are all alphabet. You can use the isAlpha method. So here we can have result is equal to name dot isAlpha. If all the characters are letters, it's going to be returning true. If not, it is going to return false. So let's print out the result. And here we have print results. If we run this program, we're going to be getting a true. Then if I try to introduce a number, something like this, if I run this program, I'm going to be getting a false because this is alphanumeric. Now, if you want to determine whether the characters are alphanumeric, then here you can use isAlnum. So this is going to return true or false if the characters are alphanumeric. If I run this program, we're going to be getting true. So even if we have only numbers, we're also going to be getting a true. Likewise, if we have all letters like this, if we run this program, we're going to be getting a true. Then if you want to determine whether the characters are numbers or numeric, then we're going to be using the isNumeric method. So in this case, I'm going to have 1, 2, and 3. Of course, all the characters here are numeric. Now to confirm this, I'm going to be using isNumeric. Then if I run this program, I'm going to be getting a true. But if I introduce an alphabet like a B here, this is going to return false. Now let's look at the strip method. The strip method allows us to remove trailing white spaces. So here we can have value is equal to, here I'm going to have some white spaces. I can have hello. Then I'll have some white spaces. Now I want to remove these white spaces, and sometimes it's part of a data cleaning process. We'll have some white spaces at the left and we'll have white spaces at the right. To do this, I'm going to be using the strip method. So here we can have result is equal to value dot strip. Now let me print out the value before stripping it off. So here we can have print value. Then here I'm going to have print result. If I run this program, you can see we have white spaces here. And then after this operation, we're able to strip out the white spaces. And now we have this. We can only see the white spaces at the left, but of course, there are white spaces at the right. So with the strip method, you remove the trailing white spaces. So if I have something like hello world, so this operation is only going to remove the trailing white spaces. It's not going to remove this white space in between the hello and the world. So if I run this program, we're going to have our hello world. Then we'll have two versions of the strip method. We'll have the L strip and the R strip. So if you want to remove the white spaces at the left, you use L strip. If I run this program, it's going to be stripping the white spaces at the left. Now, if I want to remove the white spaces at the right, I'm going to use the R strip. If I run this program, the white spaces at the right has been removed, while the one at the left are still there. So if you want to remove all the white spaces left and right, you are going to use the strip method. So this is a way of removing trailing white spaces. Now we also have the replace method. So here we can have value is equal to hello. Let's say I want to remove this character E and replace it with another character. I'm going to have result is equal to value dot replace. And here I'm going to provide what I want to replace. So I can provide E. Now I want to replace it with A. So let me remove this. So I'm going to be printing out the value before the replacement. So here we have print value. Now if I run the program, you can see originally we have hello. Then after the replacement, we have hello. So let's say I want to replace this O with A. I can have replace O with A. If I run this program, it is going to give me Hella. If I want to replace this double L with a single L, I can have LL. Then I'll replace with one L. If I run this program, we now have this. So if you want to replace characters in a string, you provide the character that you want to replace and the value you want to use to replace the character or the characters. Find method allows us to determine whether a given character or group of characters is inside of a string. So let's say I want to determine whether there is E in this string, or whether we have O in this string, or whether we have LLO in this string. I can use the find method. So here I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to have value dot find, and what I'm finding is E, so I'm going to provide E. If I run this program, it's going to be returning the position of this value if it's available in the string. So if I run this program, it is going to give me 1. So the position of E in the string is 1. Then if I try to find O, I'm going to change this to O. If I run this program, it is going to give me 4, which is the position of the O. Then if I change this to L and run this program, it is going to give me 2, which is the first occurrence or the position of the first occurrence of the character. And the first occurrence is in this position 2. I can decide to do LL. So if I run this program, it is going to give me 2, which is the position of this group of characters. So if you want to search for a given character or group of characters in a string, you use the find method. Then we'll have the count method. The count method allows us to count the number of times a given character occurred in a string. In this case, if we want to determine the number of occurrences of L in this string, of course it is 2. We can easily do that using the count method. So here we're going to have value dot count. And here I'm going to be providing the character or the characters I want to count the number of occurrences in the string. I'm going to have E. If I run this program, it is going to give me 1. If I change this to L and run this program, it is going to give me 2. So if I have things like K is occurring 3 times here. If I change this to K, it is going to give me 3. So the count allows us to determine the number of occurrences of a character or group of characters in a string. Then we have the starts with and the ends with. So in this case, we have hello. If I want to check whether this string starts with H, then I'm going to have value dot starts with. Here I can have H. This is going to be returning true or false. If I run this program, you can see we have true. Then if I change this to O, this is going to return a false. The ends with method allows us to determine the characters that end a string. So we can have something like value dot ends with. And here I'm going to have O. So this is going to be returning true. Then if I change it to LO, it's also going to be returning true. So we use this to determine what starts our string, and we use this to determine what ends our string.